Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this Saturday we have Squad Killer, a new retro-styled run-and-gun platformer. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From East Asia Soft, Squad Killer released at the end of March for the PlayStation 4, the Xbox One, and the Nintendo Switch, which is the version we're looking at today. Now, this is a title that I haven't enjoyed at all. There's just no impact for me, and a lot of elements of it kind of kill any enjoyment that I would get out of the game itself. That aside, it does have a nice price point, and for an opening sale on the Nintendo Switch, it's 20% off. So if you're interested in what you see here, then this is one that is relatively affordable. But I'll let you make that decision for yourself. So here we are back at the main menu. When we start the game, there's this interesting lag between moving through the menu, but once we get to the next section of the menu, there are 3 modes you can potentially play the game in. The main mode, which has 17 levels, and those levels shuffle up each time we play through the game. Kind of a neat little mechanic that way. At least on paper. I'll get to the problems with it in a little bit here. Then we've got the boss rush, where if you've unlocked this, you can play through and beat all the 6 bosses in the game, but you don't have any power-ups. And then there's stacked deck, which if you had this one unlocked, it'd be, I think, really neat. However, this game is actually pretty difficult, and I haven't enjoyed my time with it at all, so I haven't felt much incentive to play it enough to get better to unlock these other modes. But starting with 7 random power-ups does sound like a pretty neat mode to experience. There are 16 power-ups total in the game, just as a quick heads up. So here we go. The stages are called squads, because we're going around killing these squads of enemies. And there are, of course, all these different stages that we'll encounter throughout the course. The stages themselves have these windows, and the enemies will come out of those windows, so you kind of have an idea when you drop into the stage of how many enemies you're going to fight. Then, from there, it's up to us to learn the various patterns of the enemies we're going to encounter and, well, take them out. How are we going to do that? We have the ability to, of course, move around the stage, run and jump. We have our gun, which is decent, and we can even make better. And then there's a neat little mechanic. It's kind of hard to see from just an animation standpoint, but if you move and press a button, you can get a knee slide, and that's basically like a dodge where we can move through enemy bullets. We can also kick up tables. Those will help block bullets, but not just enemy bullets, also our own. So in this stage, we've got a total of 8 windows, so we'll be facing 8 enemies. One thing that is unfortunate is, depending on where the windows are in your relation to them, you might end up in a really bad spot when you initially spawn. So that's something to be careful of. So as you can see here, the slide is actually really useful if you time it well for getting through enemy shots, like those beams, enemy bullets, that sort of thing. As we defeat enemies, they'll drop, well, they'll leave little blood splatters on the wall behind them, but they'll also drop money. There is also one other ability I haven't mentioned yet, and that is our grenade. So initially we start with the ability to just hold 1 grenade, but it is possible to increase that through the shop, which we're going to get to right now. Every other stage, you'll have the option to buy power-ups from the shop, using the money that enemies drop. And those abilities can be like something awesome like this, like triple shot, fires 3 bullets at once. Or the cluster grenades. Throw this one and the grenade will blow, your first grenade will blow up, and then it'll cluster into a couple more grenades. One thing to be careful though is your grenades will deal damage to you, and then this one gives you a chance for your bullets to explode. Unfortunately, we only have enough coins to buy this one, and that's one problem that the game has. So because the stages are shuffled, you might encounter a stage like this in one of your first 2 stages. With only 4 enemies, we're not going to get much money from these enemies at all, and that leaves us at a severe disadvantage when we encounter our first shop. And that first shop is going to be crucial in giving us power-ups that can help us survive the upcoming boss fight right here, and the squads like past that. So here's one of the 6 bosses in the game, Weber. It's a spider that kind of has some pretty neat attacks. It is possible to dodge through it using the knee slide, which does even work in the air, something to keep in mind. Although once it's expired, you will take damage on your landing, something to be careful about. So I'm being a little bit reckless in this fight, trying to show off how the knee slide could be really effective, but let's try to actually get past this fight. So if we do, we'll actually get a shop. The enemies, rather the bosses, all have a certain number of patterns, some easier to deal with than others. But one thing that's kind of interesting is there's certain RNG to the way that the boss patterns are ultimately decided. And one thing that can happen is you can get a really bad pattern on a boss and just be kind of stuck being unable to deal any damage to the boss for quite some time. It's also very easy to die, and when that happens we can just restart. Maybe we'll go through, see another boss, and have some better chances at getting geared up. But there are definitely possibilities where we're just going to get RNG screwed. And so the power-ups start at 200 coins, 200, 400, 600. If you get really bad enemy spawns, you might not get those enough money to even buy like one power. Or it's possible that the shop might spawn with no power-ups you can afford. In that case, it doesn't even give you the option to skip. The game will just do it for you by default. Another interesting problem is it's very common for the money that enemies drop to spawn inside the environment. If that happens, there's nothing we can do. Like, we're just out of luck. Unless we have the magnetic power-up, which will allow us to pull money and various power-ups from those walls. So another thing that can happen is based off of the position of the enemies that and our relation to where they like spawn in and where we spawn in, we might get kind of like unfairly, just like screwed right off the bat with an enemy charging us and us not having enough time to deal with it, or like this bullet here, or this enemy that sprays all those bullets. If you can't dodge that initially, and you're going to take damage before you have the chance to do anything, that's not fun. In addition, there's great example there. I couldn't afford anything, so just skip the shop for us altogether. And just this little stuff like that that just really takes the fun out of the gameplay for me. So that's basically, in a nutshell, Squad Killer, at least from my perspective. If you might get better at the game, I mean, there's some fun mechanics, and with the ability to dodge as easily as we can, with a little bit of practice, I think you could actually get quite good at this game and not have a problem getting through the 17 stages. But because they're shuffled up, we do get to see a second boss here, the Worm, and this is one that is a great example of how the RNG can screw you. So it's possible for the Worm to stop and do this pattern here at a position you can hit him, but most of the time he's going to be out of your range, and he might go through all these patterns in a way that you can't deal damage to him for a long time. That just gets frustrating when a fight just moves on endlessly with no real way for you to actually end it. Anyway, so there we have it. Squad Killer served up for your enjoyment. So, as I mentioned, this game just lacks impact for me, and part of it is just the music is so bland and dull, it kind of kills the mood of the game before you really even get going with it. In the menus, in the stages themselves, it's just not a good soundtrack, and for me, that's one of those things that really is important in enjoying a title. And then there's the problem I have with unfair spawns, where sometimes, based off the way a stage is designed and where you'll be able to position yourself, you're going to be screwed no matter how you try to get started, just because of the enemies that spawn and where they spawn in relation to you. One, like a slight saving grace from that is the invulnerability period after you get hit is fairly generous. And then there's the problem, so I love upgrades and that kind of upgrade shop. In fact, actually going to the start page here, you can see all 16 of the various upgrades that we could potentially get. Oh, one more feature I should mention is it is possible to swap between different palettes. So there are 4 palettes. There's the purple palette, the blue palette, and the blue one's the one I feel is the easiest to actually see. The red, the green, which I love green, but that's just hard to look at. So yeah, blue, definitely the way to go. But yeah, I just don't like how you can get so screwed over by the shop, not getting any power-ups that you can buy, or alternatively, the enemy spawns just being so bad for you that you have no money when you get to a shop. On the plus flavors though, since there are a few, I do think the boss fights, despite having some issues with their RNG, man, there's a life in there, but we can't get it because it's in the wall. But anyway, and the boss fights, despite having some RNG issues where you might get the same pattern just like looping, I feel there's like still some really enjoyable like patterns and different bosses to experience. Oh, then there's one thing I also didn't mention is the ladder. On ladders, you can get stuck. So this is me jumping on the ladder. Don't move anywhere. It doesn't matter if we're at the very top of the ladder, we still can't move on it. Just a little bit of a frustrating movement mechanic. You think you're going to dodge an enemy, you go to jump, and nothing happens. So, there we have it. Squad Killer served up for your enjoyment. Alright, that'll just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I want to thank you so much for joining me this week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.